This video is sponsored by SKILLSHare. When Kevin Smith's Masters of the Universe Revelation crashed and burned upon release, it was in some sense history repeating itself, because the He-Man franchise has crashed and burned before. The most spectacular example of this was in the mid-1980s. In what felt like it happened overnight, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, and She-Ra along with them, went from being the biggest toy franchise in the world to simply disappearing. While it didn't literally happen overnight, the air did go out of the balloon, and it happened unbelievably fast, as the Masters of the Universe line went from grossing $400 million in 1986 to a mere $7 in 1987. A collapse like that doesn't just happen on its own. We have already explored He-Man's origin and meteoric rise to fame, as well as the introduction of She-Ra, Princess of Power. In this video, we will begin by exploring the days before the fall, as we go through the commissioning of the live-action feature film, the real meaning of the Christmas special, and finally, the fall, what caused it, and the lessons that can be learned from it. One lesson we can share right away, though, is the importance of creativity and creatively minded people. There were many reasons for the fall, but the innovation of the creatives is what lies behind the rise. If that inspires you to explore your own creativity, then that's where SKILLSHare comes into the picture, and they have you covered. SKILLSHare, this video sponsor, is an online learning community for creatives where you can explore new skills, deepen existing passions, and get lost in creativity to find your way. SKILLSHare offers classes in topics such as music, photography, film and video production, creative writing, entrepreneurship, and freelancing. Whether you're just starting out or you are already a working creative wanting to up your game, SKILLSHare has classes to fit your skill level and your schedule. Classes are usually under 60 minutes and include a combination of video lessons and a class project, enabling you to quickly acquire new skills. For instance, say you want to become a YouTuber, or you are already one trying to grow your channel despite the algorithm seemingly working against you. Then the 15 lessons in the class, from clueless to content creator, make engaging videos that attract an audience, without an Palabiab, is for you. Since SKILLSHare sponsors our video, we naturally have a deal for you. The first 1,000 of our subscribers to click the link in the description will get a 1-month free trial of SKILLSHare Premium membership, so you can explore your creativity. So click the link in the description to sign up, and a special thanks to SKILLSHare for sponsoring, as we couldn't have done this video without them. We last left off in the spring of 1985. At this time, Masters of the Universe sales, both from toys and third-party merchandise, were increasing for each and every year and fiscal quarter. Filmation had just introduced She-Ra in the animated feature He-Man and She-Ra, The Secret of the Sword, and Mattel fully expected the Princess of Power to become the next big thing, right alongside He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. Little more than a year later, both would be on life support, but at this point in time, it looked as though the sky was the limit. Against the backdrop of an ever and rapidly increasing revenue stream from both toy sales and licensed third-party merchandise, Mattel saw a live-action feature film as the next logical step. To get the ball rolling on one, they hired producer Edward R. Pressman. Pressman in turn found a director in Gary Goddard, a writer in David Odell, and then he sold the package to a production company willing to take on the challenge. That production company was the 80s iteration of RKO Pictures. In the summer of 1985, just a couple of months after the release of the animated feature The Secret of the Sword, the live-action feature film was formally announced to the world. The movie was initially budgeted at $19 million, half of which was to be covered by Mattel. Mattel had no concerns over this at the time, as they were raking in ever larger and larger piles of cash. The Masters of the Universe brand was by now the biggest toy brand in the world, and a couple of months later, in September of '85, the first season of Filmation's She-Ra, Princess of Power was released. It aired consecutively with Part 2 of Season 2 of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, which meant that for the remainder of 1985, there would be new episodes of both He-Man and She-Ra almost every single day.
It's the Power Hour right here with my twin brother He-Man and the Masters of the Universe.
And my twin sister, She-Ra, Princess of Power.
Twice the excitement.
Twice the action.
Twice the adventure.
And all the power.
Don't miss an episode of the Power Hour.
This was great because they both had the power, and this caused market demand for even more toys, even more merchandise, even more of everything to reach ever new heights. Or to be more accurate, the sales of She-Ra dolls was merely doing okay. Despite their best efforts, girls still preferred the likes of Barbie and My Little Pony and the Popples to She-Ra. But the Masters of the Universe toy line of action figures appeared unstoppable. Mattel as a company were only too happy to cater to the ever-increasing demand for more. But not everyone in Mattel were happy with how that demand was being met. Mark Taylor, the legendary designer behind so many of the early characters and playsets, such as Castle Grayskull, was unhappy with not just the She-Ra line of dolls, which he saw as detrimental to Masters of the Universe, the brand by association alone, but with how Mattel were compromising the Masters of the Universe toy line itself by pumping out more and more outlandish toys with less and less care put into them. Even Filmation reacted and gave some of them but the smallest of bit parts in the animated series. Others they chose not to include at all, much to the detriment of the latter toy waves. Taylor ended up leaving the company, taking the sincerity he had brought to the table with him. Outwardly though, it was business as usual, and more product was pumped out to meet the demand. But unbeknownst to anyone at the time, the seeds of destruction had already been planted. On Christmas Day of 1985, He-Man and She-Ra A Christmas Special was broadcast. While the special itself was cute, what is perhaps most notable about it is that it marks the point where the baton was passed from He-Man to She-Ra. Without any kind of fanfare, the final ever episode of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe had already been released the month before. Following the Christmas special, She-Ra alone would carry the entertainment side of things. However, it took a while before anyone caught on to this, as new episodes weren't expected until the fall of '86 anyway. Up until then, the 2 seasons of Masters of the Universe and the first season of She-Ra Princess of Power were shown in daily syndicated reruns, driving ever more toy sales and merchandising revenue than ever before. The first half of 1986 was when Masters of the Universe peaked in popularity. This was when the future looked the most exciting, and Ivan Drago himself, Dolph Lundgren, was announced as the live-action He-Man.
The fantasy characters that started it all. The biggest selling toy product ever created. The most successful TV cartoon series. Masters of the Universe now takes a giant leap forward into a live-action motion picture. Starring the sensation of Rocky IV, Dolph Lundgren in the live-action adventure, Masters of the Universe. The fantasy becomes a reality.
This was when He-Man and the Masters of the Universe and She-Ra Princess of Power combined earned the most for Mattel that they were ever going to. Because then the other shoe dropped. The Masters of the Universe toy line went from 38.2 million in '82 to 80 million in '83, 111 million in '84, 250 million in '85, before peaking at 400 million in 1986. But from there, it utterly collapsed to a mere 7 million in 1987. How is that even possible? One may be tempted to think it was the live-action feature film, as that came out in '87. But one would be wrong. The collapse manifested itself on the bottom line of 1987, but it actually happened in the record-breaking 1986, as sales weren't evenly distributed throughout the year. Sales were at their highest in early 1986, continuing the upwards trend from late 1985. Over the course of the year, however, the arrows started pointing downwards, so when the eye-watering 1987 came around, It only continued the extreme downwards trend from late 1986. So what happened in 1986? A few things. First among them, the fall of 1986 was when kids noticed that there were no new He-Man episodes, only She-Ra. Seen with adult eyes, these episodes were good, often more sophisticated than the earlier episodes of He-Man. But for boys at the time, this did nothing to alter the perception that He-Man had been sidelined. While He-Man would make the occasional guest appearance, he always played second fiddle to She-Ra and her merry band of Barbies. Oh, and Bo. That was fine when He-Man still had his own series, but now it symbolized that He-Man no longer had the power, only She-Ra did. This impression was made all the worse by browsing the toy shelves. 1986 saw the release of the second wave of the She-Ra toy line, and it was a huge wave, comprised of Barbie-looking dolls and their accessories. These reinforced to boys everywhere that not only was the She-Ra toy line not for them, but that even if they liked the Filmation She-Ra series, they probably shouldn't be watching that girl's cartoon. What made matters even worse still was the Masters of the Universe toy line itself. Even though there no longer was an animated series, with only Marvel's Star imprint of comics supporting it, it kept going. But the 1986 wave was weak, featuring no one's favorites like Extendar, Snoutspout, Rokon and Stondar, both of whom served the same function as Geode the Rock, decades before Star Wars The High Republic made that joke. These were the exact kind of lame, half-assed characters that caused Mark Taylor to leave Mattel. Between this incredibly weak Masters of the Universe wave in toy shelves and the sidelining of He-Man on TV, countless boys who had been fans for years already walked away. Still, the 1986 wave at the very least had variants of He-Man and Skeletor, even if they were the worst variants ever released, with a cat fighting Skeletor and all. The 1987 wave didn't even have that. Every single year, new generations of kids that had been too young the year before discovered He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, and this was no different even when there were only syndicated reruns. In 1987, however, there were no He-Man or Skeletor toys on the shelves, period. In fact, the only ones potential new fans would even recognize from the syndicated reruns were Randor and the Sorceress, and no one else.
Each sold separately. And remember, you can get King Randor free when you buy any 3 Masters of the Universe figures.
Without getting He-Man and Skeletor, there was no reason to get into the Masters of the Universe, not when there were so many other good alternatives that, unlike He-Man, had their power. Many will jump to the defense that He-Man had had his day and that the collapse was inevitable, and there is some merit to that. However, the kind of rapid decline we saw here was entirely preventable and caused by mismanagement only. Not content with having conquered the boys' market, Mattel wanted more. With invaluable help from Filmation, they made a successful brand expansion in She-Ra, which did bring in more girls, while retaining the built-in audience of boys. But that was with Filmation. For purely administrative purposes, Mattel made an incompatible She-Ra toy line, which in practice functioned as a repellent for the original audience. But they could get away with this for as long as the flagship series He-Man and the Masters of the Universe was on air. But then they made the inexplicable decision to cancel that flagship series, while also compromising the integrity of the flagship toy line, the two things which attracted the built-in audience of boys in the first place. Or put another way, in their attempt at appealing to a wider demographic, Mattel neglected their core audience. Hence, the core audience walked. The wider demographic couldn't uphold anything without them, and thus, the biggest toy brand the world had ever seen went down like a house of cards in no time flat. As for why the She-Ra line was made in the image of Barbie dolls in the first place, you'll recall that was due to the extensive lobbying from the ladies in the girls' toy division, who did not take kindly to the boys' toy division for the first time beating them in sales. Well, once the core audience of boys walked away from He-Man, the girls' division pretty much never was beaten again, so great success!
One theory was from Dave Capper. He says, you know, the reason He-Man sales aren't doing well is because of you. I go, me? He said, yes. He said, you came up with She-Ra. That basically demasculized He-Man, and now boys don't want him anymore.
We started to get feedback that if an 8-year-old boy had been playing with He-Man for 2 or 3 years, and now his sister was saying, I have the power, that there was something that just didn't feel as cool.
Seriously though, this is a case where toxic interdepartmental competition within the company greatly contributed towards killing the Golden Goose. By establishing She-Ra Princess of Power as a separate IP within Mattel and having a different division run it, the She-Ra line did not complement the He-Man and the Masters of the Universe line in the toy shelves, quite the contrary, they were mutually exclusionary. Not only was any kind of interplay between He-Man action figures and She-Ra dolls practically impossible, the moment He-Man himself was sidelined on TV in She-Ra's favor, and when the Masters of the Universe toys started sucking on top of that, the compound effect was that the Golden Goose that He-Man and the Masters of the Universe had been up until then was cooked. That may sound bad enough, but there's more. Establishing She-Ra as a separate IP instead of a part of the Masters of the Universe brand had some short-term benefits, as any third-party licensee who wanted to use both had to pay the license fee for both. In the long run, however, a separate IP can be sectioned off, and that's exactly what happened with She-Ra. Due to a series of corporate takeovers on the Filmation side and other rights wrangling, Mattel no longer outright owns She-Ra, Princess of Power. Today, whenever Mattel wants to put out a She-Ra action figure, and yes, I said action figure, because modern-day reissues have seen She-Ra released as an action figure in the image of Teela under the Masters of the Universe line. But whenever Mattel wants to do that, there's a lot of legal red tape due to all the parties involved. If only She-Ra had been part of the Masters of the Universe line from day one, things might have played out very differently. Considering both the entertainment side of things and the merchandise side of things, He-Man, She-Ra, and the Masters of the Universe thus serve as a masterclass in what not to do. Looking at not just the Revelation series, but what has happened to many other franchises in recent years, that is a masterclass many a showrunner and many a brand manager could need. All of that, however, is with the benefit of hindsight. Let's go back in time, back to the story. As 1986 rolled over into 1987, Mattel found themselves increasingly relying on the live-action feature film to bail out both them and the Masters of the Universe brand. How that dynamic changed things, we shall see in the next episode as we take a deep dive into the making of that movie. Till then, let us know your thoughts on all of this in the comments. And before you go, if you feel inspired, remember to click the link in the description so you too can explore your creativity and be among the 1,000 to get a 1-month free trial of premium SKILLSHare membership.